Good evening. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for November the 21st. And thank you to my colleagues in Committee of the Whole for joining me here this evening, along with Councillor Duncan, who's joining the committee electronically this evening. Thank you to staff who are in chambers, as well as a number of staff members who are joining us electronically this evening as well. And thank you to members of the public for joining us here this evening or online. I'd like to begin the meeting by calling to order and respectfully acknowledging that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Wasanish people. I can start, please, with approval of the agenda.
So moved.
I'll move to Mayor McNeil-Smith first, please. Pardon?
Chair, thank you. I would like to move the agenda with one amendment. Committee is aware and that this evening we also have an in-camera meeting after our this Committee of the Whole meeting this evening. I'm not anticipating a long meeting. We do have items for discussion. One of the reasons we have Committee of the Whole is to provide ample opportunity for discussion. But I will move an amendment that we alternate under staff reports item 8B, the budget variance report, and item 8C, the engagement summary for the active transportation plan. In that I think if we get to 8 o'clock or so and are coming to those, or that we have one left, that I would sooner see the budget variance report come to the next council meeting next week, and proceed with the active transportation report this evening.
Thank you. So if I can have a seconder for that.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. We now have a public participation period. Public participation at Committee of the Whole is limited to 4 minutes each. And if you'd like to participate in public participation, we ask that you please approach the podium and turn on the microphone. Identify yourself by name and the municipality in which you live, please. So I'll call a first time for public participation. I'll call a second time for public participation. Go ahead, sir.
Hi. I'd just like to say that...
Sorry, I get your name and municipality residence.
Yep. I was Warren Clark, and I'm owner-builder at 2246 Markinch, if that's what we're talking about.
I think you have an item on the agenda, if I'm not mistaken. Are you speaking to an item that's on the agenda?
Yeah, the heat pump problem.
Okay. Are you the presenter for that item or no?
No idea.
Okay. That item will be addressed because it is on the agenda, and we will also at those opportunities call for public participation if there's anyone who wanted to speak to that item specifically.
Okay. No problem.
Yeah, thank you. We'll
Sorry for the
circle back.
misunderstanding.
Sorry, just turn to staff through the chair. Sorry, do we have? Sorry, I'll just through the chair to staff. I don't see public participation as part of. Including public participation.
Yes,
my apologies.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's all good. Thanks. So we'll get back to you. Third and final time. Public participation, hearing none. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is a approval of minutes. So these are the regular Committee of the Whole meeting minutes from September the 6th.
I'll move they be approved.
Second.
Thank you. We have a mover and seconder. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion is carried. Now, item 6A, presentations. We have a presentation from Steve Nichols. Steve, I understand, is joining us electronically from Lionsgate Consulting. Steve, we have 10 minutes for your presentation, and then there'll be an opportunity for committee members to ask questions of yourself or representatives from Lionsgate Consulting. So Steve, over to you.
Thanks very much, and good evening, everybody. I am running into technical challenges here because I'm not at my office, I'm at home, and my firewall is not allowing me to share the screen. So I'm accompanied today by a colleague of mine, Randy Sunderman. Randy, are you able to share your screen?
I think I am, yes. Can people see that?
Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Randy, go down to the next slide.
Okay, now I gotta learn how to move the slide. Oh, hold it. Sorry, people.
Just hit your down arrow, Randy.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, good.
Yeah.
We're good to go. Sorry, a little bit of panic on our end there.
Okay, good. So I'll just take you briefly through this, and then we'll obviously be available to answer any questions you might have about the project or about the strategy itself. So why is this plan needed, and why now? So I think it's an opportunity, given the town's new OCP, to renew its economic vision. So what does the OCP do? It outlines a set of objectives and policies in various areas: municipal services, infrastructure, land use, of course, housing, neighborhoods. And of course, there are economic objectives in the OCP as well. And so the approach in this plan is really twofold. One, can we strengthen policy guidance that supports the socioeconomic objectives laid out in the OCP? And I'll talk a bit about those objectives a little bit later on in this presentation. And also, and very importantly, can we involve local and regional businesses, community groups, and economic development partners in transforming those policies into a realistic suite of actions? So what is in the OCP vision? What does it speak to? Lively, welcoming seaside town, vibrant downtown, healthy, diverse, and connected community, housing choice, clean household sustaining jobs, and reconciliation with First Nations and Indigenous peoples. So the OCP is a very important direction setter, if you will, for economic development strategies and plans, that they should be aligned. The other dimension here is a regional dimension, and I'm going to speak specifically about the South Island Prosperity Partnership. The town is a financial partner in SIP, and they have strategic direction as well, specifically the Rising Economy Task Force, which talks about innovative, diversified, inclusive, and sustainable economy. And these are very high-level overviews, of course. There's a lot more detail in these documents. And also the Rising to the Resilience, their new strategic plan, which talks about various areas of strategic action that emphasize partnerships. So the methodology for this study included primary and secondary research. So the initial analytics, if you will, were to document the economic conditions in the town and the capital region using both internal statistics and research and information, and also external agencies such as Statistics Canada and BC Stats. We've got new census data in there, of course. This was complemented with two surveys, a business survey and a community survey, both very well represented in terms of responses. So we were really happy with the feedback that we got there, and some good insights on where the municipality should be going in the future and what sort of priorities people have, whether it's the public or whether it's the business community. We also did a set of focus groups in early spring. We also did a set of key informant interviews, and the numbers are in the brackets here, of course. And then we had a planning workshop in late April that really set the direction for, or the framework for, the plan that I'm going to talk about in just a second. So this is just a sort of a schedule overview. So you can see that there's a lot of activity in the springtime. There was 2 reports delivered as part of this project, what we call a current situation assessment, or it's called a baseline report in this graphic. And then there's the actual strategic plan, was the second deliverable. And that was worked on mostly throughout the summer. And by the end of September, we had a draft, and we were going back and forth with the town a couple of times to sort of fine tune that into October. So this is just one graphic. Given the limited time, that current situation assessment is quite a long document. and there's a lot of information, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of statistics in there. But so this is just very high level. In terms of strengths, challenges, and opportunities. So strengths, we have a viable marine industry in Sydney. It's a desirable place to live, visit, and retire. It's got that small town vibe and seaside charms. It's got good weather, fantastic landscape views, safe, secure community, low crime rate. And importantly, it's got a low business to residential tax ratio, which is a relief to small businesses, which since COVID, it's obviously been challenged to keep the doors open and keep the business running. Some of the challenges: labor force availability and retention. This is a big issue in the community. Sydney has the oldest average population age in the province. It's 20 years older than the average provincial age, and that means a low labor market participation rate. That means our labor supply is not what it would be if we had a lower average age. High land prices and high housing prices, although there's a bit of a relief coming with what looks to be an upcoming recession. Balancing growth and small town ambience and friction between different land uses. Sydney is essentially a built out community. Unlike the Western communities, we don't have a lot of greenfield property that we can just create new residential subdivisions or business parks. So there's that tension between the different land uses. In terms of opportunities, housing, the marine industry I mentioned, we've got excellent potential in tourism, specifically overnight tourism, the knowledge of the tech economy. This is something that SIP is really charging hard for. We're in the capital region. We've got opportunities to do more there. Leveraging our transportation assets and our location, connecting the community to the waterfront, and strengthening the retail hub. So the strategy itself has three themes: place, people, business. There's a set of 14 strategies that you can see are lined up here. And these strategies support the OCP objectives, 4 separate OCP objectives, and they're just put in here to show you where the alignment is. So connected downtown, distinct seaside town, healthy, resilient community, and a thriving local economy. So what we've done here is made sure that it's alignment and whatever the goals and the policies are in the OCP that they're supported with this plan. So what are the priorities for 2023, 2024, which will be the first year of implementation, of course? Excuse me, working to ensure the employment land is preserved and managed to accommodate existing and future business needs. So that's specifically Harbour Road, West Sydney, and downtown. That's where the jobs are created, that's where they're supported. And as I mentioned previously, there's a lot of tension and a lot of competing land uses for that. So it's important we keep that employment land available. More active engagement and involvement with SIP programs. They do have a lot of programs, they do have a lot of things going on. And we would like, and we're a financial partner, so we'd like to make sure that we keep involved with SIP as much as possible. Leveraging Sydney's assets to diversify the local visitor economy. So I talked about some of those strengths earlier on in terms of our proximity to the Southern Gulf Islands and our tourism potential and our transportation potential. And finally, launching a business retention and expansion service that will assist local business stay and prosper in the community. And that's really targeted toward the BIA as a partnership. Now, in terms of implementation, the town does not have an economic development office. A lot of municipalities do, but this municipality does not. So the plan is being scaled and scoped to account for how this is going to be implemented. There are areas of responsibility that existing staff can be involved with, specifically around land use, municipal services, housing, property tax, and permitting. The business programs would be driven through more partnerships with the BIA, including the retention and expansion program. And the broader regional effort, and especially engagement with First Nations, would be through SIP. So that's a very high level presentation of the plan. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about where this is going or what the content of that plan is.
Thank you, Mr. Nichol, and I'll turn to Committee of the Whole colleagues to see if they have a question. And a reminder, there are some specific recommendations later on our agenda under 8A, but at this point, we have Mr. Nichol here to pose any questions to him directly on this. So I'll look to my council colleagues.
I'll take a shot. I've got a number of questions just for clarification. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Nichol. I'm referring to page 21 and it's about implementation. You just had that slide up. And under that, when you have listed the BIA advocating for business, that's not currently part of their mandate. And I'm just wondering, do you see a change? Is that you're suggesting a change in their mandate for that?
Well, that would be something that the town and the BIA would discuss. I mean, the Business Retention and Expansion Program, for example, which I just made reference to, that is a variation of the Business Walks program, which you might be familiar with. That's being delivered in the past by the BIA. So they're definitely delivering services that fall under the realm of what I would call business retention and expansion. And so, you know, it's something that they've done in the past, and we think that they're a viable partner for doing this in the future.
Thank you. Further on page 29, you state that the overnight visitors spend about $120 a day. Is that exclusive of hotel fees?
No, that includes hotels.
No, sorry, does that include their accommodation fees for that? Or is that what they spend in addition to that? I would hope it's in addition.
So when you say hotel fees, you're talking about the cost of accommodation.
Right.
Yeah. No, that includes all spending that would be made in the region while they're on their trip. It wouldn't include, for example, airfare that's purchased outside the region or in another country. It wouldn't include all transportation charges. It would include ground transportation. But definitely, if somebody is staying in downtown Victoria, that $120 a day would be reflected in, it would be reflective of the 5 major sort of spending categories for tourism, which is accommodation, food and beverage, transportation, retail, and arts and entertainment.
Okay, thank you. Page 31, there's a statistic in the first paragraph of 2.1, which lists that only 48.2% of the residents are over the age of 15. Well, if you then add in the 41% that are over 65, there's only really 11% available for work. And just wondering if that's kind of where you were going with your workforce development program.
Yeah, I'm going to, on the specific numbers, I'll defer to Randy. We may have to check that and get back to you. But in terms of, so Randy, if you can just look that up.
Yep.
But I think in workforce development, we definitely do have a high average age, and therefore low labor market participation rates. So normally in BC and Canada, the adult participation rate would be, you know, anywhere in the high 60s to 70s. It's quite low. It's only about half, and I think potentially less than that. Again, Randy's the statistic guy.
Yeah.
But I think one of the challenges for Sydney, and this is why we talk about the workforce development and especially the inclusivity stuff, is you have to look around the edges and the fringes to try to increase your labor market participation rate. That's why we talked about women, youth, the underemployed, and First Nations as well. I mean, these are all sources of labor supply for the community. And, you know, it's a big challenge because for Sydney, if you do have a high retirement community and they would prefer to stay and purchase services and participate as much in you know, civic affairs, if you will, then it's important that the businesses, especially in downtown, are able to provide, viable services, and that labor supply is going to be critical to keeping those services going. So it's not an easy one. Labor market and workforce development is never easy, but I think there's, a lot of municipalities could do more. And I think this is really about operating around the fringes. And we talk about Beacon Community Services and the good stuff that they're doing. It's more just trying to get those numbers into a better area where our labor supply is a little more flexible.
Okay, thank you. Page 36, you listed some work that the SBI is going to lead in the initiatives of 3.2.1 to 3.2.3. I'm assuming they're already doing these. Is that you're suggesting they initiate this, or that they are already doing it?
Well, yes, they're doing part of the. They're not doing the business retention and expansion. That would be a specific program that would have to be piloted, as we say. But yes, they're doing. They're already doing some of this stuff. So I think it's just trying to get more traction and sort of a little bit better service delivery. And so I don't think it's a big step, but it's an important step.
Okay.
So Councillor Duck, I've got a speaker's list. Do you want to keep going? You got a couple more?
I've got a couple more.
Okay,
Yep.
carry on.
Thank you for your patience. Page 37, the NAIC codes. Are you aware that the initial work was done on that with the Economic Development Commission? I'm just wondering if you had access to that information, or you're suggesting we start on that one.
Well, yeah, the references of the codes was specifically in relation to the business license data. And I don't think your business license, it wasn't as of 6 months ago, so I'm not sure if that's being changed or not.
Okay, thank you. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next I have Councillor Duncan, and then I believe Councillor Keith.
Thank you. Well, my questions will be quicker. So I know, in the challenges, you do have potential recession there. I think that becomes less potential every day. One thing that I noticed, I work in manufacturing sector, is that, and I think in our industrial sector we'll have that as well, is that supply chain became such an issue. And I'm wondering if in any of your interviews with the stakeholders, anybody mentioned that and had been talking about things that Sydney had been doing. I know, for example, that my company has been onshoring sources and finding duplicates. And at the business conference for our industry, that was the primary topic, was the way each of the businesses was doing that again. And so I thought Sydney, with our industrial area and the fact that you focused on maintaining that land, that seemed like a key thing, and I'm just wondering if anybody had brought it up.
Yes, it was. I can specifically remember Viking Air talking about the issues that they were having, and there were others. I mean, obviously, there's been quite a bit of downsizing, if you will, and pulling back until things recovered. But and the other thing is that Sydney is, if you look at its stature as sort of a waypoint, if you will, and in terms of transportation, the transportation part of the supply chain for all of Vancouver Island, whether it's through the ferries or whether it's through the airport or whatever, I think it's pretty critical. Yeah, it did come up quite a bit in the business survey, especially. It didn't come out at the top 3 or 4. I mean, the top 3 or 4 issues in the business survey were still labor supply. That was the single biggest issue by a long shot in the business survey. But definitely in the focus groups and in the interviews and in the planning workshop, the whole supply chain thing, was frequently brought up.
So, Chair, if I may, just to follow up.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, did any of them identify a role that they thought I mean, I guess it would be broader than Sydney, but maybe Sydney and the Peninsula and through SIP could play, or any initiatives that they've been working on? Or did they not seem to think that there was a local ability to address that, really?
Are you referring specifically in relation to manufacturing?
Yeah, and I'm thinking, I mean, we have some really big, I'm going to get, like, say, Titan boats as an example. And, you know, I imagine in Viking Air, you've already brought up that parts as well as just as labor is going to be big for them. And I know, you know, we have various shops that manufacture widgets and things, and whether SIP businesses have begun kind of looking to each other and collaborating that way. I mean, I know SBA had briefly talked about, you know, even cross-training employees. And I mean, no, I don't think any businesses have really talked about that, have ever done it or gotten anywhere with it. But I'm just wondering if that's something, especially with SIP and the large manufacturing set businesses that we have, if they'd been looking at that sort of thing already, whether they have things that they can keep in stock together, whether we have different machine shops that can start making things for each other.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely something, obviously, that we didn't specifically talk about in this plan. Not that it's not a good idea. I think that definitely is a regional, you would be doing a regional approach with that, because obviously you've got a whole bunch of municipalities with an interconnected economy, right? So whether it's Saanich or Central Saanich or Victoria or the Western communities, it's all interconnected. But as far as I'm aware, the SIP programs don't specifically deal with that. That issue of nearshoring or, you know, onshoring or whatever you referred to there. The one thing that I think, so when you ask something like that, I think one of the questions, one of the approaches that local economic development has to take is, in order to be aware of those opportunities, and in order to create sort of a dialogue, if you will, and at least a discussion that something has to be done, we have to be more engaged with the business community, specifically in Sydney, specifically. I mean, the BIA is very engaged with the BIA, but the BIA does not represent the West Side, doesn't represent Harbour Road. And I think one of the things we have to do here is, so the issue that you talk about is, should we be discussing and talking about and researching, maybe piloting and doing something? In order to do that, we have to create more dialogue, more networks within the community. And I think that Sydney needs to be a little more proactive in dealing with SIP, in saying, like, just talking about this issue that you brought up. I mean, that's what SIP is there for. If we think that that's important and it's got some traction on a regional basis, we should be going to SIP and saying, hey, should we be doing something on this? Manufacturing is not a big part of the economic base. But as I point out in the report, it pays above average wages, it pays a lot of taxes, and it allows residential tax rates to be lower than they are today. So those employment lands are very important. And I think SIP has a major role to play here. And I think we should press SIP on things like that.
All right, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I have next on my list Councillor O'Keefe, followed by Councillor Novak.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the report. I do have a number of questions. Maybe I'll go through a few and then
thank you.
Pause to pass off to somebody else for an opportunity and get back to me later. Okay, so where will I'll start with in terms of data. And so one of the things I liked when I was looking at your approach documents when you were first putting your proposal forward to us is about doing a full analysis of the community. And one of the things that you were going to include was establishment counts. So from that, what I was anticipating, a business count, so a count of the number of businesses that are located in Sydney, what they're involved in, and, perhaps some analysis on how we have fared over the last couple years through COVID in terms of have we had more businesses start up? Did we lose businesses? So I wonder if you looked at any of that.
Well, yes, in the current situation assessment, we did have the benefit of the previous EAC, I believe it was EAC work that was provided to us in terms of business counts. Now, those business counts were provided, they were gathered through primary research. It's not Statistics Canada, the Statistics Canada Business Register, which I think you might be referring to, which provides the number of businesses by NAICS classifications or industrial codes. So we did an economic base analysis, but that was primarily through the census data. That's our primary source of trying to determine where the economic direction of the community is going.
Okay.
Randy, I don't think we purchased business counts for this project, did we?
No, we didn't. Sure.
So I guess what I was anticipating is that the town has a list of businesses. So is that information that you might have tapped into, or did you consider tapping into that? I know that during COVID, we had hired, I believe it was the chamber, maybe the SBIA, to put a list together of businesses. So was that information that you had access to or looked at?
Yes. Yes, it's in the current situation assessment. And we did have the business license data as well.
Oh.
So, yeah. So
Okay.
that's
I guess
talked about in the
didn't,
current situation. It's not brought up in the strategy itself, but it is contained in the current
Okay.
situation assessment, which is the first of the two documents that I was talking
Okay,
about.
sure. In your trend analysis of different industries and things, I wondered if you looked at all at home-based businesses and the film industry. So home-based businesses, just anecdotally, we've heard that those have grown, especially during COVID. So I would have been interested to see if there was any information in terms of what's happening with that particular sector, and whether there was any strategies that came up in terms of how we might better support that particular business sector.
Yeah, I'll have to say the home-based business issue did not come up a lot in the engagement process. I mean, it's there. I mean, we talk about it a bit in the current situation assessment. It tends to be a service, as you're well aware, it tends to be a service. It tends to be focused on personal services and a little bit on business services. But the challenge with home-based businesses, unless it's tracked in the business licenses, then it's very hard to quantify what's going on out there. And as I said, it wasn't a priority. Not that it's not important, but it really didn't come up a lot in the engagement progress.
Okay.
Process.
In terms of the film industry, so that's something that we've seen more film production companies coming to Sydney, and with a film studio being projected to be built in Saanich in the near future. So anticipating that perhaps that might have an impossible, potential there for us. So I'm wondering if that was something that was looked at or considered in terms of what is it would be interesting to know, I think, for us, what is currently the contribution to our economy from the film industry, and whether there's any potential for, increase there, or things that we can do to encourage that.
Yeah. Okay. So again, in the current situation assessment, the film industry was not profiled. So we went back and forth with the town a few times to determine those sectors of the economy that we're going to profile. So the film industry was not in there. the film industry is an interesting one because there is a film commission, there is a film commission in the region, and they do market the region. There is obviously economic impacts flowing from that. It can be very lucrative in terms of the labor market, of course, because the province subsidizes the labor on film production. That's why there's so much activity in BC, and specifically in the Southwest BC. For the municipality itself, really, when we're talking about sort of getting more out of that particular sector of the economy, it's about having what I would call a friendly or at least a receptive business climate. So that we're talking about permitting processes, allowing film crews to set up and operate, and then strip down and move, and sort of just having sort of that concierge service as I would call it. But the actual marketing and the actual, how great we are, let's do business here. The film commissions, that's really their bailiwick. And so, it's something that on the municipal side, I think it's about the business climate and just making sure that we're receptive to this industry and that they don't have a bad experience if they want to come into the community. And specifically in Saanich, I'm not aware of that specific initiative, but if there are sound stages going up nearby, then that's definitely an opportunity.
Okay.
We want to pause there? You want one more before?
How
we
about
move
I'll
on?
do one more, and then
Sure,
I'll
and then we'll pass
pause.
the torch. Thank you.
So this is under the place initiatives where you talked about maintaining and regularly updating the list of housing assistance programs. And I guess my question about that is, I think it's a good idea, but it seemed like it was outside the scope of what a local government would get involved in. And that there's local community organizations or provincial organizations that do that sort of thing. So I was struggling to see that as a role for us, and I was just wondering, is this something that you see other local governments doing?
Well, local governments are definitely involved one way or the other. I think if you want to trace sort of the cause effect of housing from an economic lens, we have labor supply issues in the municipality. One of the ways to sort of alleviate that is to have just more housing choice. I think it's as plain as that. We're not advocating here that the municipality get into the supply side equation here. That's a big step. That's what we're advocating. What we are saying is working more closely with folks like BC Housing and private developers on innovative solutions and things that are going to alleviate specifically the supply of workforce housing, which is what's really desperately needed in the region and the community.
Okay, so when you're talking about that, you're talking about programs that we could refer developers to. You're not talking about a registry where individuals would contact us to find out where is there vacant housing in Sydney.
No, we're
Okay.
no, yeah, definitely not.
Yeah.
We're talking about enhancing the supply of housing from a development perspective.
Okay. I'll leave it there for now, Chair.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Novak next, followed by Mayor McNeil Smith, and then Councillor Garnett. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really only have one question, but it's kind of a long one. First of all, I'd like to say that I really appreciate the amount of work that went into this. I think the background work and data is quite extensive, and it shows a pretty good understanding of the situation here, and that I'm appreciative of. But I'd like to focus for a moment on the section entitled Initiatives, and there's a few of them there dealing with places, people, and business. My concern with these initiatives is that it appears to me to be a very high-level strategic sort of document, and the suggestions are very high-level and strategic, and there's not a lot of tactical meat, as I like to call it, actual things that we should go out and do the next day to make some of these things happen. And there isn't really an allocation of, or there really isn't any direction as to who exactly is going to do it. For example, in people initiatives engaging with Indigenous groups, it says the town should work towards. Well, the town is a big organization, and I don't know if that now we get this document in our hands, and we have to sort it out and decide who does what, when, where, how, and why. It would seem that if we're going through the trouble of getting this level of expertise in the process, that we'd have a little bit more tactical support. That's really my concern and point.
Yeah. So I'll just quickly respond to that then. It is a strategic plan. So it is at the strategic level. There's definitely no tactical detail in here. And there's a little bit of what I would call operating detail. So if we look at the continuum from strategic to operating to tactical, you know, we don't have a detailed action plan in here, for example. One of the reasons for that is we don't have an economic development office. If we had an economic development office in the municipality, we would probably have more of that detail, but we don't. So one of the challenges here is who's going to do what. So in each of these initiatives, we talk about who the lead would be. So we outline that. We have a schedule at the back of the strategy where there's a sequence of when these would begin over a 3 and 5 year period. So we have some of that, what I would call operational detail, but definitely it's a strategic plan. Definitely it's high level. And also in the last section, in terms of implementation, what the town has to do now is they have to do an annual work plan. That's what an economic development office would normally do. You do an annual work plan based upon the strategy. And that's where your tactical and operating detail would be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next I have Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the presenters for an excellent presentation. I have a few questions. The first is under the place initiatives, and there's an initiative 1.1.1 that makes reference to analyzing trends and undertake smart practices research that support OCP land use objectives. Can you elaborate a little bit on smart practices research, please?
Yeah, that's basically looking at what other communities are doing to protect and sort of take their employment lands to a higher and better use. And so it's really about keeping up with the trends and understanding, you know, what those other communities and what sort of national organizations and industry associations and real estate associations, you know, are doing, so that the municipality sort of is doing the best that it can within its powers to make sure that that employment land is not only still there, but is more productive than it has been in the past. So, especially as we move away from a goods producing economy more to sort of a knowledge-based economy. So smart practice research is really about trends, developments from you know, other municipalities, from local government, from real estate associations, et cetera.
Thank you. My next question is the next page over on page 28, under place initiatives, housing, and initiative 1.3.1 says define workforce housing as rental units suitable for key industry workers earning between 60% and 120% of Sydney's median medium income. And I understand that. The town in a previous project entered into a housing agreement. So it was about a 60-unit project. There was about 30 affordable units. It was with a nonprofit housing organization. I'm referring to the Aranza for those who are familiar. For the affordable units, people had to be employed. That was a condition of being able to rent those affordable units. So my question to you is are you seeing that happening, or that information being used in policy outside of affordable rental housing agreements?
No, I wouldn't call this, I wouldn't call this a policy recommendation. I would just say that it's a guideline.
Okay, thank you. My next is under place initiatives as well, and it's under 1.5 investment attraction, in particular hotels, and increase the local hotel offer. And I think recommendation 1.5.5 is work with Destination Greater Victoria SIP and other partners on a hotel attraction strategy. It has come of late, I guess, while you were working on this project, but we do have a new hotel, a proposal by the Victoria Airport Authority, 130 rooms on approximately 3.5 acres on airport lands in Sydney. We, as you've noted elsewhere in this plan, we have very limited to no greenfield space in which to bring in new developments. Did you have other ideas or visions in terms of where hotel properties could enter the community on significant lands?
No, it would have to be a it would have to be a redevelopment of some sort. It could be, and I was aware of the proposed, new property on the airport lands, but no, there was no. I think, the sort of the logic on this one is, and I'll refer back to the $120 we discussed earlier. Right now, a day tripper, and there's lots of day trippers in Sydney, they'll spend anywhere from, $10 to maybe $25 or $30 a day. That's the average day tripper. Yet an overnight stay is going to spend 4 times that much. And an overnight stay implies that you're staying overnight in accommodation. So, no, we would, and again, this is where it's a high level recommendation, but unless it's going to be at the airport, then it's likely going to have to be a redevelopment proposal of some sort.
Thank you for that. And there were two initiatives, 2 private sector initiatives that didn't come to council, weren't public for the most part, in the downtown, and one didn't go through because of a challenge in land assembly, and another didn't go through because of the land values. So those, I think those are identified under our challenges, at any rate. But thank you for that. I think it's my last question is with regards to childcare access. That's under People Initiatives 2.3. And you make reference to 40% of parents had difficulty finding childcare services, and that was a Canadian statistic. You had access to the child care research that was done. It was a joint municipal, 6 municipalities on the peninsula in Saanich and Oak Bay participated in generating data in terms of childcare needs.
I'd have to go back and check to our bibliography in the current situation assessment, but I don't recall that one, no.
Yeah, I don't recall that one either.
Okay. It is available, and it certainly highlighted the need that you've also highlighted with regards to access. But one aspect that I don't think I see acknowledged in the plan is that one of the challenges is a significant challenge is actually there's certainly the physical spaces but is also childcare workers. And for example, we have a new daycare that opened in that same Aranza project I was referring to earlier, and it hasn't been able to come close to it meeting its capacity due to childcare workers. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Nicol and Mr. Sunderman, for your presentation and for your willingness to answer questions from the committee. My first question is on page 22 of your report, under About Implementation and Other Partners, and the key organizations that can be involved. And I was wondering if you could speak to, given the importance of the transportation issue, why BC Transit wasn't listed as a potential organization we would want to reach out to.
Yeah, that's an oversight. We can put it in. I mean, we talk about it in the transportation. We talk about it in the transportation section strategy, but we can add it in here.
Thank you. If I may continue, Chair. On page 29, under Place Initiatives on 1.5 Investment Attraction, you have listed as one of your bullets a workforce housing project pilot. And I'm wondering what you envision that might look like.
Well, there's not a lot of detail here, of course. I mean, we've got a set of bullets here that are fairly high level. So I think this one, to refer back to the housing strategy that we were discussing with the 60% to 120% sort of threshold. I think, you know, it can be very similar to the project that the mayor was just talking about. It's really, you know, there's various ways to skin this cat, but I mean, what we're referring to here is somehow to not create housing supply that's simply going to be scooped up by non-working families. And there's a bucket load of research on this area, you know, from BC Housing and from you know, the BC Real Estate Council and the Canadian Real Estate Council, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, you know, we didn't have a specific project in mind, but I think the operative word here is workforce.
Thank you. And one more, if I may, Chair. Thank you. On page 32, under bullet People Initiatives 2.3.3, I found this one intriguing. Work with Beacon Community Services to explore a land swap for the 3rd Street property that will allow to build a multi-level, multi-use development with affordable housing and a daycare facility, along with their other core services. Although I found it intriguing, I'm wondering, given the limited amount of town-owned land, I'm trying to picture what that would look like as well.
Yeah, I mean, this one is, I mean, this obviously came up in discussion that we had with Beacon itself, of course. Excuse me. And yeah, I mean, I'm not fully aware of the inventory of land that the municipality has and whether those opportunities would be there. But our understanding from talking to Tricia at Beacon was that property there right now is not really developable by them. I guess because of the current zoning. And if they were going to put any more money into the sorts of services and the programs that they provide, it would have to be at a different property. So this is really, and there's nothing to prevent them from selling their property and buying another property, just doing the market route to be able to. But this was strictly, you know, get together. Is there an opportunity for a partnership here? If it works for the municipality, if it works for Beacon, why don't we try to figure something out? If not, you know, nobody wants to lose money or nobody wants to get into a development process that's just not going to deliver the sort of benefits that are expected out of this.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And so we've gone around once with questions from everyone. I am cognizant of the fact that we have a couple of development variance applications before us and presenters there as well. I will take a look for second-time speakers. I know Councillor McNeil Smith, you have one, and then to Councillor O'Keefe, please.
Thank you, Chair. I do have two fairly quick questions, and they were just one was a continuation on the childcare access, through you, Chair. Under childcare access, the initiative 2.3.4, it says seek out an early childhood development hub opportunity. Is that something other or larger, broader than just a daycare? Is in a mixed use or residential development?
I mean, I mean, it could be, but it's basically, I mean, we are referring to childcare access here. I mean, that's the focus.
Okay, thank you. The other one is back to workforce development, and in a couple of places you highlight that 2/3 of the Sydney resident workforce work outside of the community. Now we're a fairly small community, so with the, for example, the airport, BC Ferries, the Sydney North Saanich Industrial Park, people can be going a relatively short distance and working outside the community, but that's 2/3 of our residential workforce, and that seems like a high number. And then elsewhere you indicate that of the employees working in Sydney, approximately 2/3 or greater are coming from outside of Sydney. From your experience as a consultant in other communities, are you seeing those numbers different, and if so, in what ways?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, I live in the Lower Mainland, so there's a lot of what they call labor mobility and movement between municipalities, much like the capital region. I'm going to ask Randy here, because the current situation assessment, a lot of it was done with the old census data. Randy, I think we should just go back and check the newest numbers from the 2021 census.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah.
On this issue. And but it is a high number.
Yeah,
it is a high number, but I attribute that to the physical footprint of the municipality is quite small.
Yeah, and thank you.
I would just like to add to that, though. I think one of the things you also face is the lower skilled workers just aren't able to live in the community, and we picked up on their experience of having to travel from outside. So I think you have a bit of a mismatch. Like we've been talking a lot about the housing and the workforce. You do have a workforce that has to move into the community because they just physically can't find affordable housing there. So I think that's another element that overlays this discussion.
Thank you. And I think those two numbers, along with the number that 42% of our current population as of the recent census is 65 or older, highlights that we're in a very attractive community. We're very attractive for retirees. We're very attractive for people who want to live here and are happy working elsewhere. And then for people who are employees here, they have a preference to wanting to live here as well. So we have kind of a triple whammy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I will turn to Councillor Keefe. I'm hoping to conclude this segment in about 10 minutes. It would have been an hour of discussion on this, but I'll turn it to you, Councillor Keefe.
Okay, I hear you.
Thank you.
Just sticking with the point that the mayor mentioned in terms of the workforce data. So I was looking at that as well, and if you're going to go back and take another look at it, what I'm wondering about is I sat in a session on the new census data with Stats Canada recently, and what they had mentioned in the workforce data that was that's presented when you look up a community profile, the default is that it provides you with the type of occupation residents in Sydney are employed in. So whether or not they work in Sydney or not. And so what I was trying to discern from your tables that you've provided, so for example, in Table 9, you're talking about federal government administration, and it indicates that there's 160 people working in federal government administration. I don't think there's any federal government offices in Sydney itself. there's, you know, the airport is federal, there's the ocean sciences, that's in North Saanich. And so what I'd like some clarity on is, do those figures represent jobs in Sydney, or those are just where people in Sydney are employed, but not necessarily here?
Yeah, it's the latter.
Okay.
So the data set, if you look at the data set and you look at the title closely, it will say employment by industry by place of residence.
Okay, so it
There's
doesn't,
another data set actually called employment by industry by place of work. That's not generally published by StatsCan. You actually have to buy it. So it
Okay.
is by place of residence, yes.
Okay, so this-
Which is why in some communities, you'll see in oil and gas, for example, you'll see oil and gas employment in Sydney, and you go, well, what's that?
right,
You know,
okay,
it's usually somebody flying back and forth from Fort McMurray.
yeah.
Is what it's telling you.
Yeah,
So,
okay, that's great, that's a good, good clarification to have. In terms of the tourism data, I see that we had data from the airport. I wondered if we had data from BC Ferries, which is really relevant for us, and it would be good to know because there's thousands of people that drive by us every day. So is that information that's available that could be provided?
yes, it's widely available. It's published on a regular basis for all routes by BC Ferries. We do talk about research and a data dashboard for the website for the town. That's one data set or data point that can easily sort of populate a current economic development webpage for the municipality that we should be using, because
Right,
we're an
okay.
important, we're obviously an important BC ferry destination, if you will.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And just going to investment attraction, you know, talking about encouraging large format retail. And I'm wondering whether, in considering that, whether there was consideration also given to the negative impacts that large format retail might have on our small independent businesses on Beacon. So whether that was a topic of conversation and whether you have any ideas or particular strategies on how we might mitigate that.
Well, that's a hot topic. So I think that, you know, I think that in terms of investment attraction, and I'm not sure if that one actually applies because we don't have greenfield property in, you know, we don't have tracts of land that we could develop, you know, big box retail, for example. So I don't think that would be a focus of any investment attraction. I think there's other priorities for the reasons that you've just spoke to.
Okay, good to know. And I guess just my last one would be, I was really interested in the comments you made earlier in the discussion, as more in the context of SIP, but you talked about the need for the town to do more to engage with the business community, to have more dialogue, to allow for creation of networks, and you gave SIP as being an example of that. And I guess what I wonder is, and I've heard this with the BC EDA and other organizations well, in terms of the local government's role in being that convener of bringing people together. So in essence, kind of like a mini SIP sort of, as you know, providing a platform or place for them to establish those networks, to communicate, to get more familiar with what's going on in the broader business community and open the door for collaboration and that sort of thing. And if there's anything you'd care to comment in that regard.
Well, it's important. I'm not sure if the municipality would be the convener. It would be a participant. I mean, I think really that's where SIP should be asked to do more for the municipality, or the municipality be more proactive in engaging in SIP. The BIA does a lot of good work. You have a chamber as well, so there are organizations there that have their finger on the pulse, if you will. And I think it's just a matter of not creating new networks, but just making sure that the dialogue and the debate that's going on is active and engaged and is informing municipal decision making.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further questions from Committee of the Whole, so thank you very much, Committee, and my thanks, Steve Nickel and Randy Sunderman, for your time this evening responding to Lionsgate's consulting report. And at this point, I'll thank you very much for your attendance this evening. Next item on our agenda is 7A, Development Variance Permit Application Number DV 100328 at 2241 Markinch Place. And we have a presentation from Mr. Mark Taylor. Mr. Taylor, good evening.
Good evening.
You have
How
10
doing?
minutes.
Yeah, I'm here with my wife Sheila and our builders, Ryan and Ken Brucker from Oak Bay Construction, and also coincidentally some neighbors of ours too. So this seems like a small issue relative to the broader discussion you've just had, but it's for us it's an issue that we've got to deal with. We're seeking a variance for our heat pump location. It's basically about the setbacks. Not sure how familiar you guys are with the Markinch development, but they're all small, very small lots. In some cases, there's only 4 feet between on both sides between properties. We happen to be on a corner lot, but at any rate, we're seeking a variance to keep our heat pump where it ended up being put in place. And you might ask, well, why are we coming after we're finished building? We've essentially just moved into our house. Frankly, we were caught off guard on our final inspection. We were told that the heat pump is in the wrong place. So we're here on relatively short notice to ask for a variance. We spent 15 months working with our designer, with our builder, with the town of Sydney, going through getting approval for all our plans and that, and this came up sort of at the nth hour, so we're a bit, as I say, caught off guard. Anyways, we're here to seek that variance. We read the staff report. They seem to be supportive in terms of their comments. They are signaling that to go out to canvass the neighbors, and we understand the need to do that for the variance. Just a few other comments I'd like to add. That within the neighborhood itself, there is at least 3 other heat pumps in similar location on the side of the lots. I'm assuming they either received permission, they must have their final occupancy at this point. So it was a surprise when we'd put ours in relatively the same place that there's others, and now we're getting flagged at the nth hour. So there's precedence there. Our heat pump has been running for a couple months now, and as far as we know, there's been no complaints about noise or the location. And then just lastly, for future consideration, I'd ask that if there's something in the process that can be done for others, as this, because this issue's, heat pumps are going to be becoming more common, if they can be dealt with at the design stage as opposed to the final stage, that would be great. And I'm not sure if Ken or Ryan want to add anything else to that, but
Yeah, I can add just a few words.
Come on up to the podium, please.
okay. Well, thanks for your consideration.
Thanks, Mr. Taylor. We will have a public participation opportunity to ask any questions of yourself or potentially colleagues from Committee of the Whole, but carry on a couple more minutes.
Hi, I'm Ryan Brucker from Oak Bay Construction. So we were one of the builders. We've actually built another house in that subdivision as well. And I guess Mark was touching on the end that there's quite a bit of oversight that happens with the permitting process and the development permit process. And even down to the orientation of our brick pavers in our driveway, like there's a lot of oversight there. And this was something that seemed to be missed at every stage. It was missed at the permitting process at the beginning. It was missed at rough-in stage, which is the main opportunity to see if there's any issues with any locations, even down to plug locations or anything. So that's the second opportunity for the municipality and the contractor to work together to make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen. And then we also had like a very detailed landscape plan that we had to put in place, and that details out just like the locations of every possible square foot because the lots are so small. And the heat pump wasn't even shown on that plan either. So it's hard as a builder for us to know every possible bylaw, especially working in the CRD when there's so many different municipalities. So we're just hoping that, you know, in the future, that that this is something that will just get changed. We know we've obviously know that this is a thing now, and we'll be looking for it on our end, but we're hoping for the same thing there as well. And just Mark touched on it too. I had to drive around the subdivision. There's quite a few homes, and so this is the second to last home in the entire subdivision. And meanwhile, there's a lot of homes with heat pumps on the side, and so I think that just points at, you know, I was surprised. I was doing the final occupancy walkthrough when this came up, and
Thank you.
so it's quite a hardship on the client, because it's a costly fee to try to make changes, and there's not exactly a lot of room in the back of the lot. All the lot space is spoken for, and then the other thing is we're not really creating a hardship on any of the neighbors because they're all in the same boat. The neighbor beside him, he's in the exact same boat with his heat pump there, and the neighbor beside him is in the exact same pump. So we're
Thank
not adding any sound.
Yeah, and they'll have the opportunity, neighbors have the opportunity to comment. Thanks very much for your
Okay.
presentation.
Thanks.
At this point, I will look to members of the public participating to see if they have any questions of Mr. Taylor in this application. Yeah, please approach the podium. Name and address, excuse me, name and municipality, please. One more time, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Warren Clark, and I owner builder at 2246 Markinch, so right across the street, pretty much from them. And I reside at 2248 Ardwell, so I'm speaking for me and my father that live there. Just a couple things I wanted to just add. My heat pump's on the side as well. Where we reside, it wouldn't really be that desirable to have 3 adjacent properties having their heat pumps facing our house. There'd be because their backyards face 2248 Ardwell. And another thing I wanted to point out was that 2248 Ardwell is currently zoned for 4 lots, and we will be applying to do 6 with all their backs facing each other. So if all the heat pumps have to go in the back of the house, now you have all of them facing the, I guess, relaxing areas in the back, with all that noise kind of like amplifying in that area. So I just wanted to bring up those points. That's
Sure.
all I had to say.
Thanks very much for your comments. I'll call again anyone in the public. Any comments or questions on this item? And third and final call for public participation. Seeing none, I'll go to committee colleagues. Any questions of committee colleagues for Mr. Taylor? Mayor McNeil-Smith? Councillor Keith?
Thank you. So if you could just clarify for me, so when your plans are submitted, do they show where the location of the heat pump, like the plans that have to go to the town? Is it shown on there, or what's?
I don't believe the specific location of the heat pump one.
Yeah, so if you could just
We can
comment
have
on
staff
that,
answer
and as,
that following this.
and,
but-
and as part of your application, do you, presumably you identify what the heat source is gonna be?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's exactly what I was talking to, that, you know, there's so much oversight on a lot of it, but that's something that wasn't brought up. It's not flagged, and it's quite easy to do, like at the beginning, when plans and permits are being issued, it's like, a quick conversation about having that location confirmed on plans at that point, and then, but it wasn't checked.
Okay. And, thank you, just a question through you to staff, I guess, on the same vein. So is that part of our normal process in terms of, you know, is there a checklist or something of things that our staff look at? And is that on there, or will it be in the future?
Through the chair, I'll defer to Ms. Verhagen.
Sure. Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor O'Keefe. I've just taken a quick look at the development permit that was approved for this house and also the building permit. Neither of them show a heat pump location on the plans. So it is something that staff review, and if one is shown, then we look for it and see if it complies with the zoning bylaw. In this case, neither permit showed a heat pump location on the plans.
Okay, and so I guess my follow-up is, do staff think it, since, you know, the town is promoting the use of heat pumps, we're giving rebates and that sort of thing, it's becoming more common part of our climate change initiative. Is that something that we might consider sort of putting on the checklist when we, in the future?
It is on the checklist now, yep.
Oh, it is.
So as we're discussing projects with people, we do try to mention all of the things. As you can imagine, there's many, many regulations.
Okay.
So staff do their best to mention everything. If something's missed, we do expect the property owner or homeowner to ask about it as well.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Just
Go ahead.
just a side note, we did have lots of good discussions with the town of Sydney, and they were very helpful. For whatever reason, this particular item just didn't come up either through our landscape plan or through other conversations. So it's unfortunate, but.
I think,
Yeah, I'm just, as a comment, I at some point, I guess it was acknowledged that there be a heat pump, because of course, not every new construction has a heat pump, so they wouldn't be looking for it necessarily.
Right.
But I'll leave my comment there. Mayor McNeil-Smith?
thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Taylors and to the Bruckers for attending this evening and taking our presenting and taking our questions. I have 3 questions, and one is, sorry, you've answered one of them, and that is the heat pump is operational, currently operational. The second is the house that is adjacent to the east. Does it have a heat pump on the west? Have a heat pump on the west side of that house, which would in essence be adjacent to the heat pump on your property?
No, it's on the opposite side. It's on the east side of the house.
It's on the east side of the house. Okay, thank you. And could you comment, either yourself or the folks from Oak Bay Construction, is it technically feasible, technically possible or feasible to move the heat pump to the exterior side? I realize there may be considerations with regards to landscaping and so on, but no, I'm asking a technical question.
I would have to check with my heat pump provider, but from what I know about line sets, that's the coolant, that they only have so many linear feet before they can work properly, and so the chances are no, that we wouldn't be able to do it because we're kind of hemmed into this location now, so it would have to get ran. I don't know offhand, like at least 40 feet to the back of the home,
Or to the other side of the house.
or to the other side, which would be the same sort of issue. So offhand, I would say no, but I don't know that for sure because I'm not a technician with heat pumps.
Okay, are these homes on a pad or a crawl space?
These are on a crawl space.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Last look to committee of the whole members, Councillor Nove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Taylor and Oak Bay Construction. I've had the good fortune or misfortune, depending on your perspective, to have encountered a very similar situation about a year ago. I purchased a new home, and when we purchased the home, made the deal to purchase it, the heat pump unit was on the side of the home. And we're not in the same zoning as you are. We're in a slightly larger lot size, but still with very constrained side setbacks. I think it's 2 meters or something like that from the house to the property line. In any case, we couldn't get our occupancy permit, and our builder was forced to move the heat pump to our rear yard. So I guess I've got a couple of concerns. Number one, it is possible to move the heat pump. It's a nuisance, it's very expensive. You can move it up to about 75 feet away from your central unit without any degradation of performance. But as Councillor O'Keefe mentioned, and a few other people have alluded to, this is becoming far more common. And as I look around my neighborhood, I see heat pumps on the side all the time. So it's absolutely ridiculous to have a bylaw that A, isn't enforced, B, is impractical, and C, virtually impossible to enforce in the coming years when we'll have so many more of these homes that are built on these intensive residential lots where no matter where you put it, you can't meet the bylaw, because the bylaw says that the heat pump must be 3 meters from the property line. So even in a backyard, it means you need to have at least 20 feet of backyard or more to have the heat pump legally situated on that lot, which in some situations, and I suspect yours, I don't know your details, but I suspect that you don't even have that.
We've got about a 16 by 20 foot spot that we could potentially put a heat pump in our backyard.
But it probably also violates the setbacks.
Yeah.
So no matter where you go, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. My recommendation would be to ask staff to look at this a lot more seriously. I think we should allow Mr. Taylor to.
Point of order, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Sorry, we have a decision on our agenda tonight with regards to this variance request. I appreciate that there have been questions and comments with regards to our bylaw and what might or may not be addressed in the future, but I think we need to take a decision on the variance request this evening.
Fair enough. I think my point has been made, so I'll pass back to the chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Taylor? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Taylor. We'll deliberate now. To
Thank you.
Committee of the Whole, there is a recommendation. I'll turn briefly to staff. Ms. Verhagen, did you have any comments before the committee addresses the recommendation?
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to point out that there is sufficient space in the rear yard to locate this heat pump in compliance with the zoning bylaw. I believe the previous speaker was wondering if it was possible on a small lot, and it is in the CD 41 zone, which is the zone of these properties on Markinch Place. They're required to have a 5-meter rear setback, which this house does. The house is 5 meters from its south lot line. So there is room there to put in a heat pump without needing a variance, but they've requested to put it in that interior side yard, which would need a variance. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll now turn to Committee of the Whole. Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a question through yourself to staff, and that is there sufficient space for a proper setback in the exterior of this property?
Thank you. Through the chair. No, there is not. The building I'm looking at the building permit here. It's the building's about 3 meters off of that exterior side lot line, and that is the minimum setback. So a heat pump is also required to be 3 meters, and heat pumps are not permitted in the front or exterior side yard. So putting one on the west side of the house, being the Sinister Place frontage, would also require a variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm prepared to make a motion if there are no further
I
questions.
have one other question. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff. We had a similar request come forward for townhouses on 7th Street. And as I recall, within our final deliberations, we required some kind of a noise abutment or attainment. So is that something we could require here as well, if we were to eventually get to that point, to eliminate any kind of noise for neighbors?
That could potentially be something put on this heat pump. This one appears to be a different model than the ones on 7th Street. Those were more of a narrow construction. This one appears to be a wider heat pump. So I'm not sure what attenuation could be put on those. We'd have to speak with our building officials about that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I would move the staff recommendation that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, that's 246 feet, of 2241 Markinch Place be notified regarding development variance application number DV 100328 to reduce the required minimum side setback for heat pumps, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion, Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate both the homeowners and the Oak Bay Construction attending this evening and taking questions. I think this is a reasonable step forward to hear from the adjacent resident or residents regarding this. I think that information would be helpful to council. We do know that these are intensive. This is an intensive lot development or small lot development, and that there are other heat pumps in neighboring homes. I might, if there was a concern, I might consider a preference for having it in the exterior side setback. I did ask a question of staff today. It is in our staff report, clear in our staff report, that heat pumps are only permitted in the rear yard or the interior setback. And my question through to staff was there adequate setback room in the exterior side, which is adjacent to a roadway? And there is not, but it is a roadway versus a residence on the exterior side, and there is fencing around the property. So I don't think there would be an appearance difference if the heat pump was located in the exterior side. But rather than visit that option first, I would certainly prefer to hear from adjoining residents. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to the seconder.
Thank you, Chair. I'm supporting this motion going forward to the neighbors, and I think as my colleague Councillor Novak mentioned, I think we're looking at the tip of the iceberg. As some of the speakers spoke about heat pumps in the area that maybe don't have similar variances. I know at least 2 in my neighborhood that don't have those variances. So I think it's unfair that we extend this to just one that's been identified. And I would suggest that we follow up on Councillor Novak's suggestion that we ask staff to look at a review of this bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Chair. I will support the recommendation. I do want to make a couple of comments, and it's just that I mentioned this before with when we have these intensive infills, and this is one of the downsides of that, is that you have homes so close together that it's almost impossible to put things in terms of heat pumps. Having said that, I did go out and visit the home yesterday, and it is loud. I heard it from the street, and it is bigger than normal, as staff spoke to. I have a multi-unit one myself that's the slimmer style. So I'm hoping, based on the noise I heard, and we'll hear from public, but I think if we can do some kind of a noise abatement, that might help, given that we've already sort of set that precedent with other variances in the community. It's I just don't want to hold the homeowners in this situation. It's awkward for them and difficult. But there is an onus on the developer and builder to make sure that they know what is required before they actually install something. And I think that's important for, not necessarily in this case for the developers, but any other developer out there, is that you need to do a deep dive in what exactly. And there's a lot of requirements, but this could have been avoided if there was more thorough diagram maybe and showing the heat pump was going to go there. But I'm fully supportive of having this go forward to hear what the neighbors have to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Looking to committee of the whole, any further discussion? Mayor Minnick-Smith?
Just before the vote, I just want to comment in terms of the discussion. I think it was it was good that it came out, but a committee council will recall that staff are undertaking a review of the zoning bylaw, and so I think this matter will be appropriately addressed under that review. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good point. Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one last quick point.
Speaking to the motion.
Speaking to the motion, I think it was Councillor Garnett mentioned the possibility of sound attenuation and the noise. So, can I address that?
Staff have already commented that it may well come forward following the public comment period. So we're not approving this, just approving it to go out for consultation at this point. So yes, it would come back, and that would be the time, if staff don't include it in the recommendation at that meeting, that would be the time to include it.
Fair enough.
Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 7B. This is a development variance application DV 100326, Unit 103 at 2360 Beacon Avenue, to relax sign bylaw regulations in order to allow for a roof sign. We have a presentation from the applicant. I'm not sure who is presenting. Please state your name, and I will welcome representatives from 900 Degrees to Sydney and to the Committee of the Whole meeting. Over to you, sir.
First of all, just turn on speaker.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
Perfect. Let me just turn my computer on here. I'm Adrian Ortiz. I'm the owner of 900 Degrees. We're proud to be part of the Sydney community. And first of all, I'd like to start by congratulating the incumbents and the newcomers to City Council.
Thank you.
I'll just, some brief background of who we are. I know our reputation was built in Langford, and I know we have a lot of customers in the peninsula and in Sydney, but just to go back a little bit to who we are and what we do. 900 Degrees was established in 2014 in Langford, and we have since become a successful and well-recognized brand name in the Greater Victoria area. 900 Degrees has won several awards in quality and customer service, including top restaurants on TripAdvisor, top 10% of restaurants worldwide, and awards by CTV News, Times Colonist, Eat Magazine, Yam Magazine, and we are really proud to be included in the Where to Eat in Canada guide, which ranks Canada's top restaurants. By the way, the only other restaurant included in this guide in this area is Deep Cove Chalet. So we're serving up comparable quality of food and service for less than half the price. So we have become a little bit of a destination restaurant in Langford. We've got customers coming from all over the island, from Nanaimo, from Duncan, definitely from Sydney, from the peninsula, and from Greater Victoria. Coming back to we are taking a leap of faith opening a restaurant in Sydney at the tail end of COVID, especially given the current economic and labor environment that we have. This is our first attempt to grow the brand from the original 900 Degrees that is in Langford. And one of the points that we absolutely need to get across is this is not a clone of what we have there. If we go the route of cloning, franchising, McDonaldizing our business, we cannot replicate the same success. So 900 Degrees, the brand is the mama, and she has now had a second child, and it's called 900 Degrees Bistro in Sydney. I don't know if you have a copy of the, sorry about that, of the original letter. I can hand this out.
We do, thank you.
Okay, just for the committee to see where we are in terms of the logo for the group itself. So it's 900 Degrees Group. We have 900 Degrees Pizzeria in Langford, and it's 900 Degrees Bistro in Sydney. There was oddly enough, there was a mention of us this morning on CTV News, and I just want to play the audio here. It's less than a minute, but it really goes back to what we're trying to achieve here and why specific signage is so important to what we're trying to achieve here in Sydney.
The reason I'm putting this on the list is because Adrian, the owner, who you also know,
yes,
they've opened a second location.
What?
Oh, you didn't know this?
No, I did not know that. Where is it?
It's 900 Degrees Bistro. If you're looking for a date night for Rachel, go for a cruise to Sydney. It feels like you're in Italy.
This is a mini vacation.
What's different? The menus are different.
Yes, we have wood-fired pizza, and it is as good as the Langford location.
Lasagna, fettuccine scampi, risotto with truffles and balsamic. They did this filet mignon in the wood-fired pizza oven.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
You're not going to find a single thing on the menu here that's identical to there.
The reason I'm putting this on the list.
So what we're, and it's well received, the fact that customers are understanding this. We've had a bit of a challenge, people coming to Sydney thinking that we're exactly the same thing there. It's a completely different demographic. So when we looked at Sydney and we saw the opportunity of the woodshed closing their doors, we said, okay, can we be successful in Sydney? Well, we can if we make something tailor-made to Sydney, because it's a completely different demographic than Langford. It's an older demographic. They're looking for more fine dining, more of a dining experience, if you will. We've got $250 wine bottles in the restaurant, and they're selling. It's a different world than Langford. So just going back to the variance at hand and why it's important for our future success. I think the variance goes back right to the fact that our logo it's 900 degrees and it says bistro on the bottom, which is part of the corporate brand. I think that the bylaw says that it has to be kind of a one-liner sort of thing. And the only thing is we're trying to be consistent across the brand in terms of our growth strategy and our logo. So I think the variance goes back to having the bistro underneath the 900 degrees the way that it's displayed in the logo, which is consistent with the 900 degrees group logo and the 900 degrees pizzeria logo. So if we're continuing to grow, and hopefully we will in the coming years, the logos have to be consistent with the brand. I will say one more thing, and I'm really proud to say this. We did put Langford on the culinary map. We've been there now for 9 years. There was really no decent places to eat in Langford before we opened up there. And after we did, Brown Social House, House of Botang, several international chain restaurants, etc., have followed. So we're not saying that Sydney's not on the culinary map. We just want to up the ante, as they say. And the fact that we have so much tourist traffic going back and forth to the ferries and to the airport, I think we can capture a lot of that traffic. We show up on TripAdvisor, at least in the Langford location, we're ranked #1 on TripAdvisor. It's hopefully, knock on wood, only a matter of time as we achieve the same success here. And just to close, I do want to have a clarification here, and Rick can follow up on this. I think the agenda refers to a rooftop sign, and the variance mentions a rooftop sign. This is not a rooftop sign. It is a sign that goes on the upper part of the existing building, not on the roof. Rick, do you want to add anything to that, or?
Well, maybe we'll turn to staff if you don't mind, and
Perfect.
and we'll have you stand by
Yeah.
for any further questions or comments that may come. I'll thank you for your presentation.
Thank
Clearly
you very much.
passionate. Before I go to public participation, I'm going to ask staff to clarify the question with respect to the variance itself, and maybe speak briefly to your report as well, staff, at this time, and then we'll go to questions for Mr. Ortiz-Mena.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please, Ms. Reagan.
Sure, thank you. So the sign bylaw for Sydney does define this as a rooftop sign. A roof sign is any sign erected on or above a roof or parapet of the building. So the sign appears to be attached to the parapet of the building. The parapet being that railing that kind of looks like a balcony railing, but there's no rooftop patio up there. So the roof line is the horizontal element below that vertical element. So the sign is above it, which is why the report talks about it as a roof sign.
Thank you. Is there anything further you wanted to add with respect to the staff report, Ms. Verhagen, at this time?
No, I don't believe so. The applicant presented what's proposed very clearly. So thank you. And the staff report has all the information in it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll then turn to public participation. If there are any questions for the applicant from Mr. Ortiz-Mena. Second call for any public participation. And seeing none, I will turn to my colleagues to see if they have any questions of the applicant or staff at this time. Councillor Duck.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz, for your presentation. I've had the pleasure of your establishment in Langford when I was working a contract there, and can vouch for both its quality and atmosphere that you presented there. And having worked in Italy for 10 years, I can also vouch for the quality of the food. So thank you for that, and I look forward to having the same experience in Sydney. Just a quick question relative to the location of the sign. You have an existing sign there. Is that kind of where the new sign will go, is just to replace that?
That's exactly right. That's a temporary sign, and it's there. We opened and we had no signage, but also I think the effect is we wanted to make everybody aware of what we're going for, so there's no confusion. It would be basically that temporary sign turning into a permanent sign, if you will.
And there will be some lighting from rear lighting to it to highlight the lines, I think, or something?
That's exactly right. It's rear lighting. The only thing that's lit is the actual letters. And then there's 2 lines denoting the Italian flag. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Turning to colleagues, Councillor McNeil-Smith. Excuse me, Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'm prepared to move the staff recommendation that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, that is 246 feet, of 2360 Beacon Avenue be notified regarding development variance permit application number DV 100100, again 326, to relax sign bylaw requirements in order to allow permit roof sign, and that any written correspondence received before to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
Second.
Have a mover and seconder. Mr. Ortiz, thank you very much for your presentation. You may have a seat.
Thank you. And just one last comment here. I heard a lot of discussion today on investment attraction and small businesses. I think facilitating this sort of request from small businesses really does speak a lot to attracting small businesses in Sydney, and hopefully many will come.
Thank you, sir. And we wish you all the best with your business, and I look forward to being a patron. Discussion, Mayor McNeil-Smith as the mover.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Ortiz-Mina. It's good to see you this evening, and appreciate the importance that you've highlighted with regards to the brand. We appreciate the drawings that were provided within the to accompany the staff report that clearly show your strategy in that area. I think the staff report is very clear. I think the parapet that is on this particular building adds character to the building, and I think given that there is a canopy that's recently been installed at the business, that this is a reasonable location for this sign on the parapet. Thank you.
I'll turn to the seconder. Thank you. Hearing none from the seconder, Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ortiz-Mina, for your presentation and answering questions. I just have to say that I have actually visited your restaurant, and it is an excellent experience. But I have to say that your thought and hope of capturing traffic is going to be difficult when you need to have a reservation just to get in, which speaks to your success. But
we've got 11 tables. That's it.
I know you're a victim of your own success, so to speak. And as Councillor Rintoul said, wish you nothing but the best in the future with your business. And yeah, I'll support this. As the mayor said, for similar reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None. Motion is carried. Thank you very much. We are now on to agenda item 8A, which is the Economic Development Strategy Final Report. We've had considerable conversation with respect to this through the Q&A opportunity. There are some specific recommendations within the staff report, and
Mr.
so
Chair.
I'll open with Councillor Duck.
Yep.
He doesn't want, no, we've discussed that. Councillor Duck.
So I'd like to move the recommendation with the following amendments. That the draft economic development plan be referred to the Economic Advisory Committee, whose members include Sydney Business Improvement Area Society and the South Island, and the South Island Prosperity Project for review and comment with a request that comments be received in writing by December 23rd, 2022. And 2, that the draft economic development plan, along with comments received, be forwarded to the strategic planning for consideration of the plan, along with potential priorities.
Thank you. Before I look for a seconder, could I have you one more time where you, I
Sure.
believe, had an amendment? Could you just,
So,
to the recommendation?
Number
just-
1,
Yeah.
the recommendation is as amended, that the draft economic development plan be referred to the Economic Advisory Committee, whose member includes the Sydney Business Improvement Area Society. And the rest is as it is.
And so just to clarify, does that imply then that it would not be referred separately to the SBIA? That
Correct.
they would be a party to this only by way of the EAC as the vehicle?
Yeah, and I'll explain that in
Thank you.
comments.
So I'll look for a seconder.
Second for discussion.
Second for discussion, Councillor Duck.
So I think one of the challenges here is that we're looking for a return on this document by December 23rd. And I think this would provide some leadership from the EAC. We have that committee in place for this purpose. And that would be up to them to drive this forward. And I think by virtue of the fact that both BIA and the Chamber of Commerce are members of this committee, that it would be expedited for return. And I say that because in past, both other organizations have not come to the table to respond, and I think this would be helped if we had some leadership from the EAC. Thank you.
Thank you. I look for further discussion. Councillor Keith.
Thank you. I'm pondering supporting the motion. I guess a couple things are in my mind, and I'll look forward to other colleagues' contributions for the discussion. So I think it is a good idea to have broader engagement in this, just to single out the SBIA, I have an issue with, is that this is meant to be a strategy for our whole community. So I'm concerned that we've targeted just one organization. So I have difficulty with that. The EAC, it hasn't been particularly active in the last several months, and we haven't given them a lot to do. But here's something that they can provide input. As you mentioned, the SBIA is a member of that. The Chamber is a member of that. So, and there's some other areas, sectors represented as well. So I agree with that aspect. What I struggle more with is whether this is even ready to go out for consultation. And so when I look through the plan, I have a lot of difficulty with it. So I would have to say it didn't meet my expectations, what I was expecting. I recognize it in our questions and the responses we got back. It was mentioned that it is meant to be a high-level document, and I recognize that. But when I look at other
Point of order, Chair.
Yeah, please proceed, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I appreciate the points that the colleague is making, but we're actually the motion is to refer to the EAC. The current conversation is advocating for another alternative or another motion or another aspect.
So the point of order is sustained. If I could ask then that that Councillor Keith speak to the motion.
Okay, so I guess what I would just say is I'm inclined to support the idea of what we're trying to do, but if it fails, I would be more inclined to perhaps propose a motion where that we would, whether it's a subcommittee or some other group to give this some further attention. But maybe EAC is the place where that can happen. So, so I think I would support that. I've come around.
You talk yourself into it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor Keith.
Okay.
I've got Mayor McNeil Smith, followed by Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the motivation and the recommendation. I won't be supportive of the motion on the floor. I think from a couple of perspectives. The first is that the composition was touched on of the current EAC, but committee and council is familiar or is aware, certainly the incumbents from last term, that unfortunately we haven't had the response in applicants to this committee, and so the committee just meets quorum with the current members because several positions are vacant. And if we go back to the terms of reference established for this committee, which was at the beginning of the last term, the intent was to have representatives from the key business sectors in our in Sydney's local economy. And currently we do not have a representative from the marine sector. We have not had we do not have a representative from West Sydney. We do not have a representative from retail, and we do not have a representative from service. And so while the concept of the EAC, I think, was a good one in terms of bringing representatives from the different sectors together and meet with representatives from the two business organizations, the Chamber of Commerce and the SBIA, that is not currently the makeup of the committee, and that it won't best represent the business community in terms of providing review and comment. I look at what the contrast to that is, and with the staff recommendation of referring this to the other reason I'm not supportive is because it doesn't involve the South Island Prosperity Partnership. We heard earlier through the economic development strategy how important SIP is. This council.
Point of order.
Yes, proceed, Councillor Dack.
The motion does include the South Island Prosperity Project, so just to be clear on that point.
Sorry, can you clarify the motion, how it's included?
Yes. So I read the motion, and the only insertion was in the part, so to read that motion again, that the draft economic plan be referred to the EAC, whose member includes the Sydney Business Improvement Area Society and South Island Prosperity Project for review and comment, with the request that comments be received in writing by December 23rd, 2022, etc.
Thank you for that clarification, and I will add that I believe in the last 4 years, SIP, the SIP's membership wasn't, the SIP participation in the EAC was included in the terms of reference, but they did not participate. I think they might have participated once in 4 years. They weren't a regular representative. And so I think SIP beginning and being invited to participate with this committee that is incomplete is not the...
Point of order.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I
you know what I'm...
Yeah, if I may, and I'm not sure that you're...
I'll leave my comment with regards to SIP there, and I'll make my last point, Chair, and that is that I believe the appropriate way going forward is to refer it directly to the SBIA and to SIP, because we can see in the recommendations, in the initiatives put forward in the Economic Development Plan, that those organizations are referenced. And I think what I would be looking for in terms of general comment and review and comment from those organizations on the plan, but is actually those organizations speaking to their priorities vis-a-vis what is brought forward in the plan, and speaking to what their resource is or would need to be in terms of being involved in the execution of the plan. And I believe at a committee level, you're going to be getting a consensus rather than those important, separate, and one is a regional organization, one is a local organization, being able to express their perspectives. Thank you.
So thank you, and I'll use the opportunity again before I turn to Councillor Novak. My understanding of the motion is that it be referred to EAC and to SIP separately. I just wanted to ensure that that is indeed the intent of the mover and the seconder, and that is confirmed. So thank you. I will turn to Councillor Novak next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And colleagues, I'm not convinced that I can support this motion, nor am I convinced that I can support it as was originally drafted. One of my big concerns that I voiced briefly during the interaction with the presenter was that I felt that while the background was strong, that there was enough analysis done and there was a lot of data there, my concern was that as an economic development strategy for the town, something that the town could take and go forward and actually do something to have some concrete and positive results, was severely lacking in terms of strategic impact. The strategies were, I felt, weak. There was not enough, and I know that the presenter spoke specifically to this, but I would have liked to see a little more in the way of tactical suggestions, things that we could actually do.
Chair, I'm going
to make this
call
work.
a point of order.
I'm trying to support my point here. I'm just letting
So I'll turn
council
to Mayor
or
McNeil
committee
for the
know
point of
why.
order.
My point to my point to the chair is that now speaking to the economic development plan rather than who it should or shouldn't be referred to.
I'm
So,
speaking to the
I'll just
motion to
rule on-
refer it.
I'll just rule on the point of order. First off, I'll allow you the latitude to complete your comments. Thank you.
All right. So without getting into further depth as to the value of the economic development plan, I don't think it's ready to be referred to anybody yet, because I don't feel that it has the strength that this town deserves or needs.
Thank you.
To further its economic development activity. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'll just look to Councillor Duncan potentially if I missed your hand. If you had any questions or comments, or sorry to speak to the motion.
No, thank you. I had briefly had a comment, or a question rather, but I looked it up myself and I've answered my own question. Thank you.
Thank you. As a first-time speaker, I'll speak to this, and then I have Councillor Duck as a second-time speaker. I'm reluctant to support the motion in that the SBIA has been removed as an independent vehicle, if you will, to provide consideration and comment, and in part because some of the action items that are in there specifically reference potential role of the SBIA. I know there are other actions listed to other organizations, but I was quite comfortable having the SBIA identified in the motion. So again, at this point, I'm reluctant to support the motion that's before us. Second time speaker, I'll turn to Councillor Duck, and then I have Councillor O'Keefe.
So I appreciate my colleagues' comments, and I want to suggest that by referring it to the EAC is not making it isolated to a response from the IC, but EAC, as I presented in my discussion supporting the motion, was that they could champion this going through. To some of my colleagues' comments, the contractor that put this together is now released from that, and it falls upon the staff to continue any further development of this economic development plan. And we know the constraints that staff have. So I think having the input of some good quality representation from the SBIA and from SIP, but also any of the remaining members of the EAC that can provide input, I think would be valuable to maybe taking this to the next step as we're looking at this coming to the strategic planning session. Any input would be valuable to receive prior to that time. And I think it would be of importance that we don't lose sight of this is what the plan is, and any further work on it will be done by staff, and we'll be directing that. So just want to reinforce that to my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. I have Councillor O'Keefe, followed by Councillor...
Sure. Okay.
Sorry, I have a first-time question from Councillor Duncan. If you don't mind,
okay.
Councillor O'Keefe, I'll go there, and then I'll... Oh, sorry. I have first time from Councillor Duncan, and then first time Councillor Garnett before I carry on to you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'm sorry, Councillor Duncan.
I'm sorry, after hearing Councillor Duck, I have a new question here. I think, see, the hesitation my colleagues have is that the representatives from these organizations who also sit on the EAC It sounds like, they would have input and the EAC would have a discussion, and then they would be referring their comments, and we're concerned about the fact that if we refer directly to these organizations, presumably they're boards or executives who would have kind of more of a robust feedback based on the organization rather than what the representative was bringing. They might be able to solicit feedback from more of their members in that time. And so I'm wondering if we can kind of get over that issue with, since the comments we received in writing would now be coming from the EAC as well, that we can make explicit that the members that are on the EAC would be expected to bring these back to their organizations and bring feedback back through that body. Because I believe Councillor Duck's intention was to make sure that it was broader than simply these two organizations. I mean, for example, the Chamber is in the EAC, and it would probably be good to hear from the Chamber as well. But I'd also like to make sure that they were getting broader input from their organizations before they came back as well. I don't know if that's already implied within the structure of this motion as it stands, because of the rest of that motion has remained the same, or if there's wording that can be put in there to make that more clear, to kind of allay some of my colleagues' concerns.
Thank you. I see we have a comment from Mr. Humble, so perhaps at this point I'll pause and turn to Mr. Humble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would have to confirm it, but I'm not even sure if we currently have a representative from the SBIA, current member, appointed member from the SBIA sitting on SIP right now currently. But we'd have to confirm that.
Thank you very much. So with that in mind, Councillor Duncan, anything further you wanted to clarify with that, or you want me to turn to the next speaker?
No, Mr. Hosgraf, we have a name, but that person is no longer with the organization. I don't believe they've appointed somebody else, so it looks like they would have to be referred to separately anyway.
Okay, thank you. I'll now turn to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if the mover might be amenable to a friendly amendment to just refer to the EAC, the SBIA, and SIP.
Yeah, yes.
So the chair will accept that as a friendly amendment. So the motion is now to that the draft economic development plan be referred to the EAC, SBIA, and SIP. Glasses help. Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Garnett?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. I next have Councillor O'Keefe, followed by Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you. So
just point of order. We have an amendment in place that we have to either accept.
It's a friendly amendment that I accepted.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. Just make sure everybody's aware of it.
Thank you.
okay, thanks. So just a couple things I want to follow up on in the discussion. So one of the oppositions mentioned to the motion was the fact that there's no point sending it to the EAC because there's not proper representation there. So it's mentioned that there's no representation for retail or service. I would say that the SBIA does a fairly good job of representing that sector. And so, and if the intent of the motion, as Councillor Duncan mentioned, is that it would go to the EAC and then the members there would bring it to their members. That's what my understanding would be. And then that they would be invited to provide input directly back to council. So I think that that's something that's easily solved. The other point that was mentioned is that no point to send it to EAC because, as I said, not proper representation. So if the concern is about getting proper feedback from our business community, it's unclear to me why we would support a motion that would only send the report to the SBIA. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. I agree with my Councillor Novak's comments, and I also agree that I think it's a weak plan. I think there needs to be a lot more massaging on it, and I think EAC is a place where we could get some further feedback. You know, there's assumptions being made around the table that we have to talk to the SBIA about whether they have the resourcing capability to do some of these things. We haven't even had a discussion about whether we think the SBIA is the best person to carry out these things. We need to do a lot more work on this plan to figure out what it is that we think that should be in that plan. I think a fair amount of pruning and is required in that. I think EAC members can provide some input into that. And then focus, after that we get that information, we need to look at who is best to deliver some of the things that we want to focus on. I won't get into past history with SBIA and the Chamber and projects that we've funded with them, and in terms of whether value would added or not, but I think that's a discussion that we need to have. So I reiterate, supporting the motion, and to get to, as I say, Councillor Novak's point, I think the EAC is the opportunity to get that the additional feedback in terms of where we might need to tweak the plan. Thank you.
Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I am going to move a tabling motion to table this motion to later in the meeting, so I do want to come back to it. But I'll turn to staff, whether to await a seconder for tabling or whether to motivate on tabling. I believe I should just seek a seconder for discussion and then.
I believe you need a
Seconders required.
So if there was a seconder, I would explain the tabling motion, rationale for it.
I'm not seeing a seconder. As a chair, I'm happy, if I'm permitted to second for discussion, I'll second for discussion.
Thank you. So the reason for the tabling motion is that in discussing on whether it should be referred to the AAC, we've entered into another conversation, or certain members of council have entered into another discussion, and that is whether or not this plan is ready to be referred to anyone. And so while I believe some colleagues are ready to refer this for review and comment of the current plan, and some may support the AC being the vehicle to do that, others are wanting to refer the plan to the AAC to revise the plan, or I'm not going to take from the terms that were mentioned by colleagues. And so I think we should table this motion until later in the meeting, and we should actually bring forward a motion as to whether or not this document is ready to be forwarded, ready as is to be referred.
Thank you. Councillor Duck?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Beg your pardon, yes, Mr. Humble.
Don't believe you're supposed to be debating a motion to lay something on the table.
You don't debate a tabling motion?
No.
Do you vote on it, or does the chair rule on it?
You vote on it.
So you're suggesting...
Through a majority.
You're suggesting the only option now is to call a question?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor of tabling the motion? Opposed? Opposed, Councillor Duck, Councillor Garnett, Councillor Duncan, Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Novak. We'll continue where we left off. I don't know, Mayor McNeil-Smith, if you had any further questions or comments before I turn to Councillor Novak.
Yes, thank you. So, thank you. I want to clarify points I made, not all of them, but in particular, I think there is a distinction to be drawn between referring this, going back to the ACTEV plan. In the initiatives, we see that the Sydney BIA, the Spanish Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, and the South Island Prosperity Partnership are the leads on a number of the initiatives. While those three organizations, the SBA doesn't currently have a representative to the EAC, so if the EAC is to be convened, I don't know that it's going to have an EAC representative. That's my understanding of the current composition of the committee. It hasn't had a participant from SIP in 4 years, or once in 4 years. That would leave the Chamber of Commerce as a representative. I'll go back to the point I made in terms of if the referral is to those 3 organizations individually, they represent a sizable portion of, the SIP has been involved in this from early on as a consultant. Early on in this process, and Council approved that in the original terms. That those 3 organizations can speak to the recommendations from their perspective and their respective organizations. That doesn't preclude businesses, citizens from commenting on the SecDev plan to Council, either in writing or speaking before Council. But I think it's important that these organizations, not just a single representative, but representatives from these organizations have an opportunity to review the plan from their perspective. And my comment with regards to resources is that they do have priorities, and they can identify priorities that align with, in this economic development plan, that align with their priorities, and they can also speak to what current resources they have or don't have to contribute to this. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have Councillor Novak, followed by Councillor Duck. Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a draft economic development plan. I'm not convinced that this plan in its present form will serve the people of Sydney. I feel that it is premature to be talking about referring this to anybody, whether it's referred to EAC, SBIA, SIP, or whoever. I think is, while I understand that right now is the purpose of the motion on the floor, I think it is premature. We've heard this from other councillors as well. As a draft plan, and after hearing from Councillor Duck that Lionsgate is no longer involved with the project, I would like to ask staff through the chair what we can do to bring this plan to fruition with a little bit more involved in the way of strategic initiatives that we can feel will actually serve the people, things that we can actually hit the ground running with and do something to improve the economic activity in the town. I'm not satisfied that referring this to the SBIA, the SIP, or anybody else is going to stand the town in good stead.
I'll just pause there again. You're clearly not speaking to the motion. I think the clarity from staff would be welcome around the subject of if this motion were to fail and council had an appetite to see an alternate motion raised, what latitude there is. Please confirm the statement that Lionsgate is finished. I think we understand that, but confirm if a motion of this nature is not addressed this evening, what staff's comments would be. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, to confirm, Lionsgate consulting obligation has been fulfilled. Okay, so they're done with respect to this project. That's the final draft after 3 revisions, I might add. So I think it's an unrealistic expectation to ask staff this evening what we can do fundamentally in terms of how to further address this. Quite frankly, it's going to be a lot of work. It'll involve obviously staff resources, time, etc. There will be costs associated with it if we're looking at a significant review. So we would have to report back to council, and council would have to provide us that direction.
Thank you. So I am going to turn to Councillor Duck, and then I have Mayor McNeil Smith, and then I intend to call the question.
Thank you, Chair. I fully appreciate my colleagues' comments and thank them for that. This is the only economic development plan we have right now, and we've paid money for it, and it's the one we need to take forward. I think by limiting it to one organization in our community, the SBIA, which only represents the downtown business corridor. Yeah, they have not been given any direction. Don't shake your head, Mr. Mayor. They have not given any direction outside of that area. They are the SBIA. So unless there's some extension of their powers that they would have to define and that we'd have to support, that we'd have to fund. So I think by expanding the breadth of the contact point, we have an opportunity to get some feedback on the only plan we have to push it forward. It may not, it will, the point of the return on this information is to get it to strategic plan where we can then evaluate whether it is of value to push forward. I suspect we don't have the resources to do anything beyond that, but having the input of more than the SBIA, and I'm sorry, SIP represents an outside community and not our community, by extending it to some others in the community, and I would hope the EAC would reach out to some of their colleagues. I don't see not having an appointee from the SBIA as being a hindrance, because the same question would be go if it was referred to them as a group. It'd be the same thing. So I really advocate for this going to some review by an external to the town before it comes to strategic plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And so I'm going to turn to Mr. Humble, who had clarification, I believe, and then we'll turn to Mayor McNeil-Smith. Mr. Humble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I just wanted to point out the, I guess, the potential challenge associated with being able to turn around an EAC meeting, have the review of the document, then come back with comments, which are then provided, put together, consolidated with SIP's comments, and then provided for strategic planning by the 23rd of December. And maybe it's feasible, I don't know, but it'll depend on quorums, et cetera, and the timing and the ability to get a meeting with the EAC. But what I'm saying is there may be challenges, and it may be challenges in terms of moving forward with strategic planning on January 11th and having all of that information provided and ready. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to Mayor McNeil-Smith as the last speaker, and then I'll call the question.
Just quickly, I want to clarify that I did not indicate that this would be referred to only the SBIA, and I don't think I heard that at this table. And secondly, with regards to SIP not representing our municipality, the town of Sydney, along with other municipalities, is a partner in SIP. And so SIP is representing our municipality and other municipalities in the region together.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the discussion. I will call the question. There's a motion on the table. All those in favor? I beg your pardon. Pause, please.
I wonder if you could just read back the actual motion we're voting on. That'd be appreciated.
Thank you.
So that the draft economic development plan be referred to the Economic Advisory Committee, the Sydney BIA, and the South Island Prosperity Project for review and comment, with a request that comments be received in writing by December 23rd, 2022. And 2, that the draft economic development plan, along with comments received, be forwarded to strategic planning for consideration of the plan, along with potential priorities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Mayor McNeil-Smith, Councillor Novak, and Councillor Rintoul opposed. The motion is carried. Thank you very much, committee. I will take a 2-minute 7th inning stretch, and we will come back in 2 minutes with I guess it's 8B as in Bravo. Thank you.
You can relax. The critics are leaving the room. Oh, good night, gentlemen, ladies.
Yeah, forget your hat. Yeah, your cap. They've got outside and then remember. That's the basic.
Because he's hair impaired.
No worries.
Our pleasure.
Thank you. Welcome back. We'll resume the meeting. We did amend the agenda earlier, and so 8C does become 8B, and that is a Phase 1 engagement summary and working paper for the active transportation plan. And reminder that this is an item for information, so it's a background piece. And I'll call on our Director of Engineering, Ms. Clary. Good evening, Ms. Clary.
Evening. Thank you for that. So yes, this is just background information being presented in advance of the upcoming draft active transportation plan. As part of that draft active transportation plan, we will be presenting both pedestrian and cycling network plans at that time. That'll be coming forward at a future committee of the whole. But this is a phase 1 engagement summary and also a working paper, a draft working paper for the plan. Some timelines are detailed in the staff report, but I am here to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. I'll turn to Committee of the Whole colleagues for questions. Councillor Garnett and then Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Chair. I have just one question through you to staff. Looking at the project milestones and looking at this second and final phase of engagement, I just wonder if you could speak to, will it be a similar sort of engagement process, or do you envision any kind of different strategies you might take?
Through to Councillor Garnett, it will be a more, I'll say, fulsome engagement during the next phase. All the details haven't been totally ironed out yet, but there will be some real options presented. So I do expect it to be there to be a lot more involvement. There may be open houses and things like that in the next phase, because there will be more specifics to talk about, where the first phase was more asking more general questions about how people are currently getting around town and how things could be improved for them to get around town more by active transportation.
Great. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll turn now to Councillor O'Keefe.
Sure, thanks. Just two questions. So the first one, also about engagement. So I'm happy to hear that you're envisioning a more fulsome process to kind of get into the meat of it. And so and maybe these are things you're thinking of already, but just sort of some groups or that I would be looking to engage might be.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, please.
We have a report from staff on previous engagement to receive for informations and ask questions and have discussion, and we're making recommendations on how the next phase is going to proceed. I think is out of order.
Okay, so
I'll sustain that and ask that the
okay.
speaker
So
have a
my
question.
one question about the report is that so there's mention that better and safer connections are needed around Beacon, Sterling, and the flight path. And I'm just wondering, is that being considered in the context also? Is this information from the report translating over to our current design study for the roundabout?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, we have looked at active transportation around the roundabout as part of the design process. Because our active transportation plan obviously hasn't been adopted, you know, we're trying to follow best practices, but we don't have specific guidelines to follow with respect to design standards and things like that. But we are working to ensure that there is connectivity through that design process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And looking to my colleagues, any further questions for Ms. Clary? Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one question, and that is question 20 in section 8C. It's a really big question, and I guess I'm wondering, there are some very, very good ideas in there, and I know this might be off topic, but I just want to get it out there. Is there any way that we can take advantage of some of those ideas?
Through to Councillor Novak. Yes, so that was meant to be a big question. The consultant recommended doing a couple of those at the end of the survey, just to get any, you know, ideas. And all of this engagement is being, you know, it's being used as a tool to guide the planning, which will be brought forward in the future, at probably the next committee of the whole meeting. But that is something for you to keep in mind if there are any specific things in there that maybe didn't make it into the draft plan through the consultant and staff, what's been developed. If there's anything specific in there, then that would be something that could be brought forward at the next committee meeting when the draft plan comes forward.
Good. Thank you very much. Looking for any final questions or comments from committee? Seeing none, there's a recommendation.
I'll move the report be received for information.
I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a mover and a seconder. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. During the break, we did have the suggestion that perhaps item 8C, which was 8B, the third quarter budget variance report could perhaps be tabled to the council meeting taking place a week from today. Rationale for that is just that we've got another special camera meeting and an in-camera meeting following. And so I would entertain a motion to move that item to the next agenda.
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. Discussion, Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff, I guess this is a question to Mr. Hissick. Are you feeling that you would prefer to have more time to present this, or do you feel you'd have adequate time this evening?
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. It's entirely up to council. I'm more than happy to present this next week if that's what you prefer.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
So thank you. I think in part the rationale was there may be some questions and looking for a more fulsome update on this item than perhaps we've seen previously, and so just yielding the time to the next meeting was a suggestion. Councillor Duck.
Just a quick question through you to staff. What's our agenda looking like next Monday? Do we have room for this?
I haven't seen the agenda yet for next Monday. I will soon, but I'm expecting it not to be significantly large.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other discussion, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? Opposed, Councillor Garnett. And I will look for a motion to adjourn.
Hang on. I think we're moving into camera, so we have to. Yeah, okay.
We have to have a special meeting first. So
move
motion
adjournment.
to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, Councillor Duck. All those in favor? Thank you. We're adjourned.
Is council comfortable just continuing, or do we need another 2 minute?
Yeah, I think we have to read. Don't we have to read in the?
We call a special council meeting.
Right.
And then we pass a motion to go in camera, and then we go in camera. So.
Okay.
Thank you, colleagues. I'll chair from this location this evening, and I'll call our Town of Sydney special council meeting on Monday, November 21st to order at 8:33 p.m. And I want to acknowledge that we had a territorial acknowledgement at our meeting earlier this evening, and I would look for a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of the item we received, council members received today, which is